This is Duke University.
Just a quick intro. Jonathan is CIO of O'Reilly Media. Any of you who cover technology, you got to know who O'Reilly Media is. Prior to that, a long, distinguished career with PwC. And as I was saying, Jonathan, to open this up, Jonathan and I had a similar, well, we're both Irish, so you got to call your buddies. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, we both had a career in consulting, and his interest in coming to O'Reilly was, I've talked a lot about strategy, and now I get the opportunity to execute. So he's going to give us not only the perspective on technology, but when we sit down, a little bit of what's it really like to be a CIO, and what is the role of the CIO over time. Jonathan Reichenthal.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm the first speaker at the first event. That's some pressure, but I'm so delighted and honored to be able to do that. Apparently, there's about 85 people on Ustream. So that's kind of neat right now. And I just wanted to do this because I thought it'd be a bit of fun. I'm going to say hi to my dad, who is sitting in his house in Ireland, in Dublin. And so hopefully he's on, he's watching. So he'll be able to see what I do over here. You know, from time to time I speak about it. So I got, Tony approached me and said, would you talk about technology and the future technology, its impact on work? And I thought I would have 4 or 5 hours. Well, I have 30 minutes. So I thought, how do I do that? And I'm going to do something a little bit different this morning to be able to go through the universe of technology really, really quickly. So I just, I thought it would be useful to talk a little bit about my background and to the extent how I arrived at this stage today in my life. And so, yes, I'm also an immigrant to America, and it was a terrific move, and it's been a great adventure, and it continues to be an adventure. I spent the good deal of my time here at PricewaterhouseCoopers doing a lot of IT in the back office, went on to do IT innovation, and also then worked with many, many companies out there in terms of consulting and helping them think about new technology and IT innovation, and enjoyed that a lot. Then I had this opportunity to go to O'Reilly and convert sort of big thoughts and thinking into action. And you know, it's one thing to talk about cloud computing, and it's quite another to create the strategy and implement it. And so that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm enjoying that a lot. I think there's kind of 2 things that helped me get to this point, and I'm still a work in progress, which is education for sure, no doubt. I did a lot of, I went to school and didn't stop, and kept going and going. And that's really paid dividends back to me in amazing ways. It opened doors, but you know, they say there's one thing to have a degree and sit at the table, but once you open your mouth, you know, all bets are off. It's what you say and what you do that really matters. But it certainly opened doors and has helped me a lot. I think communications was another key skill. Being able to talk about technology things in a language that larger audiences can understand. You can be really technical and talk to audiences and lose everybody, and that won't help you in making proposals and convincing people to make decisions. So those are 2 important things that I think helped me get to this point. So what am I going to do? Because I have so little time, but I want to do some fun stuff here. There is a type of entertainment, we'll call it, that O'Reilly Media does. There are other organizations that do this, so we have our own flavor of it. It's called Ignite. And it's a constrained presentation, and it's really interesting. I almost think all presentations should be like this because it forces you to talk about the things that are important and stop, right? And so Ignite is 5 minutes long. It's 20 slides of 15 seconds each. So I'm going to start it here in a second, and the thing about it is I have to go as fast as the presentation. So if I screw up, I stutter, or something happens, I'm in trouble. Now, I've given it, and it was received very well, and I thought this is a great way to be able to talk about the topic that Tony wanted me to cover. So we'll see how it goes. I hope you enjoy it. Wish me luck. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I have to stand here because I actually have to see the slides to be able to know which one I'm talking to. So what this is, I hope you'll indulge me for 5 minutes. I'm going to talk about mind-blowing, world-changing technology by the numbers, because this really is an amazing time for technology. Technology has always impacted the world, but what's different today is the reach and the extent of it, how it's impacting everybody in tremendous ways. So technology is amazing. This is a golden age for technology. So I want to start with some stats to get you started. So last year, we all sent out 107 trillion emails, right? Of which, by the way, 89% was spam. We've created 255 million websites, and we create 21 million new websites every single year. We love to blog. Everybody's writing about tons of stuff. We've written 152 million blogs, and we're creating 50,000 new blogs every single day. 8 million people follow Lady Gaga on Twitter. That's an astounding number. So the rate of adoption is really fast, right? It took to get 50 million subscribers, it took the radio 38 years. It took the television 13 years, and took the internet 4 years to get 50 million subscribers. So what we see is huge adoption. 120 million people bought iPods in just 2 years. And in terms of the iPad, 1 million iPads sold in just about 4 days. So we're adopting technology at this amazing rate. And these technology companies have huge impact. Some of them are here today. You add these 5 companies together, and you get a market capitalization of $1 trillion. There's only 14 countries in the world that have a GDP higher than $14 trillion, 190 countries less than that. If Facebook was a country, it would be the 3rd largest country in the world. It's got 650 million people involved in it. And by the end of this year, it's likely to have 1 billion participants. They're doing all sorts of fun things on there, collaborating and gaming, right? This is called Farmville here. And there's a suite of games that rest on top of social networking that 60 million people play every single day, right? Who plays Farmville here? Who will admit to it, right? Last year, we tweeted 25 billion tweets, right? 150 million people, lots of people talking, not a lot of people listening. But it's really, really interesting what's happening. It's a completely new channel for communicating messages. We're creating masses of data. This is the Hadron Collider in Geneva. It's a 17-mile circle, fires particles towards each other, and creates 40 terabytes of new information every second. There's no computer system in the world that can actually capture that much information every second. So we only capture a slight. That's 40 trillion, by the way. It's 12 zeros. That's a lot of data created every single second. So where are things headed? We're headed into mobile communications. The future, as far as we can see, is all about mobile. 5 billion people have mobile phones. I think that's around 70% of the world. And what are we doing with it? We're texting, sexting, watching videos. We're downloading games. We downloaded 10 billion iPhone apps since it was launched just a little while ago. So the phenomena of mobile can't be underestimated. And it's empowering people. Here, this is in Egypt here in the last couple of weeks. Folks powering their phones, and their phones are empowering them, right? Creating a whole new platform, a whole new way to orchestrate their activities. And this is something we've not seen before in this scale. And social media and technology is influencing the political landscape. And here we have the phenomena of our very first Hawaiian president. You know, I'm so proud of the 50th state. You know, so he benefited from, as one of his inputs, new technology. And technology is bringing people all over the world out of poverty. It's providing new educational opportunities. Here, kids are using the 1 PC per child. 2 million of those computers were distributed. It's narrowing the digital divide. And technology is everywhere. It's on every continent. It's enabling communities that didn't have access before to have new commerce mechanisms, new ways to collaborate, and engage in the world in brand new ways. So this is the future. Well, it's now, and it's where we're headed. What makes me excited is that this is happening now. And many of these phenomena I've spoken about are just in the last year, 2, 3, 4 years. Imagine the next 5 years and the next 10 years. If you want to learn more about new technology and where it's headed, here's my Twitter handle, appropriately. So you can follow me and learn more about technology. That's 5 minutes, by the way. And I think I got it in. Thank you. If you do that a few times, it gets easier. Okay, so, and if you missed some of that, it's on YouTube right now. So you can just search my name and Ignite, and it'll come up and you can watch it again. Verified all the stats, so it's good information that you can bank on it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to just kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive on some of the tech I just talked about. And then Tony and I are going to have a chat, a fireside chat, and we'll talk about some more stuff. So what are the likely? I say likely because you kind of predict the future, but it can be very, very unpredictable. And that's the one thing we know about it. We certainly, as I think Bill Gates wrote in his autobiography book, we overestimate the next couple of years, but we underestimate the next 10 years. And that's got to be true today if you look at what's happening in terms of technology. The biggest impact, and this I'm fairly comfortable with, given the data, the biggest influence on our future is demographics. And it impacts absolutely everything. Everything from energy, which is going to be the subject of our time, through to climate change. All the subjects that we are kind of grappling with are components of demographics. And if you understand demographics, you will have a better sense of where things are headed. A couple of things to think about. First of all, the world is kind of divided between populations, big countries and populations that are decreasing rapidly, and countries and populations that are increasing rapidly. And so all you got to do is kind of look at the countries that fall into those buckets and see where the future will be emerging. A lot of the sort of developed world is on a downward slide. The only reason America is growing in population is because of immigration. If we stopped immigration, we'd start to, we're about 300 million people right now, we'd start to drop in population very quickly. If you look at a countries like Japan and Russia, their populations are rapidly dropping. In fact, if you look at Russia, and if nothing changes, of course it will, I'll tell you about that in a moment, they basically go to zero. There's no one living in Russia because of just the rate of replacement of new babies. Now, what's happening is we're seeing migrations of people. So we're seeing a migration from the south to the north of the planet, and that's changing the very nature and makeup of our world. But there's a reason why we're seeing one of the real important inputs around change in the Middle East is there's very good political reasons, but a lot of it is because most of the populations are under 30 years old. You know, they have a completely new outlook. They never lived in a world in which things were completely different. They want a completely different future. So if you have the bulk of a population educated, informed, and empowered through things like Twitter and Facebook and with mobile phones, anything is possible. So let's move on. I could talk about demographics for an awful long time. The next big subject that I think is important, and this plays directly to career choices and potential opportunity for the United States, and that's around data. So if you remember from my quick 5-minute Ignite presentation, it was about big numbers and the fact that when you have lots of people connected and generating masses of information, you're collecting that information and we're able to begin to do and see new things in the data, right? See new patterns. And this is happening not just on individuals and societal level, but also in businesses. Businesses collecting enormous amounts of information. You think about a supply chain at a company like Walmart, where a single product moves through the supply chain and it keeps getting, because of RFID, it keeps getting logged in the system, and its state and its location and different attributes of it. For every, and they have a lot of products, right? They're collecting all that information. They could begin to mine that information and make decisions about the future of their business and how their products are distributed, etc. And so the art and science of understanding data is a core discipline for America. The thing, I probably will get to this, we may talk about this, the notion of where is the work for Americans in 5, 10 years and beyond. Daniel Pink talks about this. I think he's got it spot on. It's about right brain thinking. There's no doubt if we continue to do commodity work, stuff that's easily repeatable and quantitative, it won't live in America probably in the future. But if we do things that are creative, qualitative, then there is a great potential for us to do well. And because this is entertainment media, that should hopefully resonate very well. We continue to lead in that space. Of all the countries in the world, our entertainment business it's unmatched, right? And so that's a consequence of right brain thinking. The third technology really is around mobile. It can't be underestimated, okay? So I'll just repeat some of the numbers because that went really fast earlier. These are stunning, daunting numbers. There are 5 billion cell phones in the world. Now, I'll grant you two things. Some people have more than one phone, right? And some people have multiple subscriptions in one phone, right? So the numbers, but give or take a few hundred million, it's still a lot, right? It's still billions of users. There's the only thing bigger than that, well, there's nothing bigger than that, right? There's never been a technology bigger than that. And that in of itself is a key characteristic that you have to consider. So what about mobile? I wanted to kind of dig a little deeper because this is such an important space. It doesn't matter, I don't care what business you're in or what business you go into, and particularly in entertainment and media, the mobile is a major player. How you consume content, how it's distributed, these things have to be recognized and understood. So a couple of the upcoming things that are important. Near-field communications. I was thinking about this years ago, and I always wonder why it didn't happen faster, and there's lots of reasons why it didn't. So I got a BlackBerry here, I'm kind of dated, right? I'm waiting for the iPhone 5, so maybe I'll get that. So why isn't this my wallet? Why can't I pay for stuff and use it as my passport? Well, I haven't been able to, but there's growing evidence that it certainly will be the future wallet, right? Near-field communications is a new technology that's going to be broadly adopted that will allow us to use our phone, and it'll do stuff when you have sort of proximity to things, right? So you're walking up to a dispensing machine for a drink, you simply would wave your cell phone across it, and it knows to deduct the money, and then dispense the drink or the item that you're wanting to buy. Got all sorts of implications in terms of entering buildings, entering your car potentially, all sorts of ports of control. I'm clearly probably underthinking near-field communications. That would be my expectation. I think the changes will be more profound than even we maybe in this room. Well, I'll give you more credit than I give myself. I probably can't think sufficiently about the implications of near-field communications. We talked about the wallet, of course. Geolocation, right? Folks here use something like Gowalla or Foursquare. Yes, some people sort of checking into the location. Really interesting. We're still trying to figure out the value proposition, but there's some neat things in there that kind of, in terms of marketing, in terms of. I'll tell you this story. I was in Mexico over the holidays, this past holidays, sitting by myself. Actually, that happens in a restaurant. And I was, as you do when you're kind of sitting between courses and I had no one to talk to, I was on my phone looking at Facebook and things like that. And I happened to check into the restaurant and it had a special offer. And it said, I said, looks interesting. When it said, if you talk to the manager, you'll get a free drink. So I called the manager over and I said, look, I've checked into your restaurant, and for the rest of the night I had free Mexican drinks, which was, for me, Foursquare is the ultimate application. The business proposition is now clear. You know what, I'm not going to talk about cloud in any detail for the simple reason that there's people here who are going to do a better job at it, and actually some of them have their presentation almost just on cloud. So it's something I'd rather sort of just high level, I'll say, from a person who has a deep background in computer science and has worked in IT departments most of my life. This is probably the one transformer that's going to change the very nature of the work that IT professionals do. So we go from a world in which you own physical buildings and boxes with lights and cables, and you pull cables, and I've done all that sort of stuff, and you can see if the machine is on or off, the physical component, and suddenly days later, or as this transpires, it's all gone. There's no buildings, there's nothing to see, nothing to touch. It becomes virtualized. And frankly, there's a lot of folks that makes, people in the IT industry makes them nervous because their bread and butter has been boxes, unboxing and racking boxes, and now they see it as disappearing. What I keep reminding them is the challenges and opportunities with cloud are far greater than what we saw necessarily with the physical infrastructure. The virtualized infrastructure not only allows us to do things differently, but you can build new businesses quickly, and you can enter new markets more quickly. So it's a much more profound change for IT. And I think this is my last item that I want to throw out there. I would be remiss not to talk about social computing. And this is as we delve deeper and deeper into social, we realize how big the subject is. It's not just Facebook. It's Salesforce Chatter, for example. It's the collaboration and communities that are built outside of organizations, within organizations, and between organizations. And this is another area where it's net new in terms of capability, but we don't yet fully understand the consequences of what we're doing, right? If you look at the influence that social has on the political arena, on events in the world, that's a catalyst that we've never been able to do before. And I don't think when Mark Zuckerberg was in his dorm writing Facebook understood what his platform would enable ultimately. And that's, to me, that's exciting. And it's also, there's a large amount of curiosity on my part where that's all trending. So I just thought, because Tony asked me in the remaining minutes here, if I could share some big thoughts that were meaningful that you could take away with you in terms of preparing for the future. And I've touched on a few, so this is like a summary, right? The thing that strikes me most is really not underestimating the rate of change. Now, I think if you run a business, that's got to be really important to think about. Your disruptor, the next business that's going to kill you or disrupt your business entirely, could be a teenager in Norway hacking a computer right now. And that's profound, right? You don't need to have access to massive resources to be able to have a disruption impact. I don't think whether you're Google or IBM, I know IBM's here, or PricewaterhouseCoopers, that you should underestimate the power of the disruption that's coming. And that means that if you're in those businesses, you better be every day, what should be keeping you up is rethinking your business and how you're going to succeed in the future. Again, interesting, I covered this, the right-brained advantage. That's really where, to me, it becomes clear that America's future is in creative thinking and qualitative, not quantitative necessarily, the work. And so understanding the mechanism of the right brain and how commodity-type work doesn't really have it has a future, but doesn't have the most opportunity. Get your head around that, and that'll help you making decisions about your future path. So there's probably a week that doesn't pass where I'm in a bar with some colleagues or something, and we're talking about Twitter. And there's always a few folks who say, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me, right? Which is cool, which is actually okay. These things don't have to necessarily resonate or make sense. But I think it's a disadvantage if you don't play with it or kind of give it a shot. And there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of these types of things, like Foursquare. I brought up, some of you are like, what? It's Foursquare, right? My suggestion is, if you have a smartphone, just play with it, experiment, become knowledgeable on what this is. Now, that geolocation in the shape of Foursquare, and if the folks at Foursquare are watching, I don't mean to be to be negative, but if it doesn't go anywhere, right? That's one thing, and the folks, the people who don't think it's headed anywhere might say it just doesn't make any sense. If it goes somewhere, though, that's what you want to be ready for, is to really understand the impact. So, experiment. Most of this is free. And so the other thought that comes to me is when you talk about the right-brained activities, creative thinking, it's thinking about converting ideas into value, which essentially is what innovation is if you want to stand out and add value, it's got to be that alternative thinking, that ability to take an idea and convert it in the context of your business. You got to, as we move into this right-brained economy, you've got to, each of us has to be innovating every day. You can't sit and just move papers on a given day. The value is going to be in innovating, and I think that's another important takeaway. So I think I got us back on track.
I'd like to sit down with you
sure.
for a while, if that's okay. We'll take maybe 5-10 minutes just to. Thank you, John.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome. Thank
Hi,
you.
Dad.
Is your dad watching?
My dad's from Dublin, but he's in Kerry watching.
Oh,
so
okay.
2 Irish guys done good.
That's great.
So another Irish man, Charles Handy, wrote a book, The Age of Paradox. And what strikes me is the role of the CIO that you've just taken. On the one side, you're saying, look, there's all this data here. The Hadron Collider is kicking out more data than any machine can go. I can see IBM going, oh, cool. We'll take Watson and we'll throw Watson out. So there's a side that's very data-driven. It's very analytic-driven. Mike and I were talking about this, Mike from McKinsey, that there's a whole business in just kind of looking at your supply chain as Walmart and optimizing it and figure out where things are going. And there's another side that says we have to be really creative and out of the box and spend time in Foursquare to understand what the ramifications and consequences would be. And my sense is that a lot of that is converging on the role of the CIO, because at the end of the day, it's the CIO who decides to turn on chatter, right? I was talking to Ari Lewin last night. He's like, who is it, right, Polly? Who is it that decided to turn on chatter for 100,000 people at Dell? Have they thought through some of the consequences of kind of igniting the kind of social production side? That would be an argument. So it seems to me that the role of the CIO, you could look at it through budget. There's a lot of budget spending. So as you sit here as a CIO, having taken on this role, how do you balance that responsibility of, okay, there's cool technology that we could implement, managing the consequences? Do you lean it more towards the left brain logic predictive and the right brain? I think the role of the CIO is changing. So what are your thoughts on that?
It is. I just wrote about this notion of how much control does your CIO have in your organization, and there's been a lot. I think a way to answer the question is something I'm passionate about is IT governance. Something else I've kind of written about, and something that I'm proud of in terms of my first few months at O'Reilly is actually taking the decision making out of IT and back into the business where I think ultimately it belongs. But I think the CIO has a considerable input into the decisions that are made. I think if you do it well, if you have the decisions aligned with the goals of the business, you will choose the right technologies and the right things to focus on. The thing that strikes me, I think, and it shouldn't be a surprise, is that almost every new function or every new business opportunity that presents itself has a technology component, more now than ever before.
Right.
So the CIO is almost in every single meeting or has an input in every meeting. And so there is a very important role for the CIO to play in terms of what technologies are available and to get good advice around that. The notion that CIO stands for career is over is a myth. No, it's. I think we've got to be very careful. If you're running a business, you've got to be very careful to make sure that your CIO doesn't control ultimately the purse strings, that it is a governance question. But I did want to make the point, just briefly, that I was trying to get to, which was because IT is involved in every part of the business, there is always more demand for it than can be supplied.
Right.
I haven't met an organization yet that can say we have enough IT for their high demand. That doesn't exist. So you've got to govern that. You've got to make priority decisions.
So you do agree that the role of CIO it's not, that's a industrial age job. This job is becoming more strategic. Budgets are suggesting it, and then making the right or wrong call on a technology, or not getting the right one in at the right time. It seems that the aperture needs to integrate business and technology more so now than it has in the past. Would you agree with that?
There's no question. There's the question of who the CIO should report to is important in that question too. And it's does the CIO report to the COO, the CFO, or the CEO? Yeah. And you can actually it's a great study opportunity, and it's probably been done, but I'll just suggest
talk about that.
Pardon?
We can talk about that. So the center could be interested from a research perspective.
Yeah. What does it tell you about your organization, about who the CIO reports to? Yeah. It tells you a lot, actually. And so organizations, I'll just kind of glaze over, kind of 50,000 foot. If you are a CIO reporting directly to the CEO, it's probably a much more strategic position than if you report, say, exclusively to the CFO, where it is potentially a cost center.
All right, so we got about 5 minutes. Some questions for Jonathan, either on the data earlier on? Sir. Are we passing mics just so we can get the audio? Sorry, just indulging.
Good morning.
Morning.
You mentioned about left brain jobs going overseas. Too loud. And right brain jobs are the ones we're going to create here. Based on sheer numbers in China and India alone, and their upper echelon students, wouldn't you assume that at some point in time they're going to be doing the creative stuff also?
And I wouldn't. So thank you. I wouldn't even suggest that they're not doing it today. That's true. I think that's quite a deep question. Actually, there are certainly lots of prosperous economies that have moved away from sort of the industrial base to the service that still have difficulty competing with the U.S. So it's probably outside of my kind of scope of knowledge, expertise. But I would just guess, as an individual, some of it has to do with our freedoms, our politics, our legal system, the ability to copyright our material quickly, to protect IP generally. The cultural qualities of America that accepts new ideas very quickly, rather than other cultures which are quick to shut down ideas. So I think it's a multi-layered complex. Why haven't other free capitalist economies been as creative as America? That's a research question.
When I was at IBM, when we were expanding into China, Sam Palmisano, the CEO at the time, I was in the learning organization, and the age-old, we're going to have to do de Bono 6 hats for creativity type thing, and he said, what I need to get the system in China being as innovative as the United States, because it's going to drive the economy. I actually need to just move that whole thing forward. Can you solve that problem for me? And it's not just a course. It's like you say, there's a whole bunch of different things. But clearly, in the CCMBA program, traveling around the world, that's a lot of what we focus on is what are the cultural artifacts and antecedents that lead to the institutions the way that they're set up that could either impede or not impede. One example, Wendy Karan's in the room, her husband looks at just in Sharia law, the law around inheritance. So just that one institution of inheritance where in our Western society, what we'll do is we'll say, okay, goes to the first son. Henry Ford, here you go. And that institution can continue to build. In the Islamic institution and tradition, whatever was built gets divided across all the children. So you can't build a head of steam to build institutions around an institution like Ford, like a stock market and so on and so forth, that allows that to happen. It's not good or bad, it's just that there are different antecedents to allow that to happen. Ma'am. Microphone? I'm sorry.
Actually, I met a lady last night and talked about our immersion day today. So she kind of asked me the question, like, when you get deeper into technology, you will begin to think technology is really, really powerful, and will begin to ignore like the power of human interactions. So I'm wondering and curious to know your perspective, like how can we balance the power of technology and also keep the same and face-to-face interactions as before?
Mm-hmm. It's like a sociological audience, right? Ask me about software, something, something I know about. I'm just kidding. And now I got to think what the question was again. Oh yeah, so the jury's still out. Don Tapscott, who writes a lot about the sort of net generation and millennials, has very compelling evidence that this generation, the generation of folks who use social media, are the most social generation and are most engaged in community and with their families than any predecessor. So there is a little bit of myth making, that somehow if because of 650 million people on Facebook, we all now don't interact with other humans. So that's worth exploring a bit further. I don't know that we see evidence yet that we're becoming more kind of less social. Although then there's the counter argument about bowling for one, which is all about people have become detached, not just because of social media, but all sorts of technologies and the way in which we've built suburbia in America. It doesn't really lend itself well to building community spirit and sort of small town type interactivity. I think if you look at, for example, what happened in Egypt and Tunisia and it's happening elsewhere, there certainly is a lot of interaction between people, and it's been enabled by these new tools, by this technology. So I like to think, I'm an optimist, so I'm going to say that someone like myself who's a technologist can certainly be kind of myopic and sort of think about the technology piece of it, but more broadly, what we're seeing it manifest as is a great enabler of the things that we want to do as humans. We want to have, we want to crowdsource things and orchestrate events that we couldn't do easily in the absence of technology.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion on this, right? So I viscerally remember being on a plane when I was in IBM in corporate, flying up to LaGuardia, and I actually started crying. And I'm not, men aren't supposed to cry, especially Irish guys. This is strange for an Irish guy to be crying. And I was actually reading a Wired magazine, Bill Joy article, said why the future doesn't need us. And it was, if you haven't read it, it's a pretty moving article. Bill was the CTO, right? He invented Java and stuff at Sun. The guy is a technologist, but he was painting this scary picture of, Matrix, and we're all fuel cells and stuff, and the computer's kind of taken over the game. And I was quite disturbed by it. And then, thankfully, John Seeley Brown came back and had a response to it. And then Tapscott and Clifford Stoll wrote a book called Silicon Snake Oil a while back, saying you can't download trust. And yet we see more and more relationships being developed through things like Match.com. So I think these are precisely the kind of issues that an institution like Duke is here to look at and try and understand more. But it requires more rigor, and it requires bringing different disciplines together to actually take research approaches and intersect them in new and different ways to answer these questions. Because in a way, the technology is getting out ahead, and we have to figure out new and different ways to understand the phenomenon we're observing. So this is the beginning of the discussion. There's networking. There's lots of more time. If you have questions, that's good. The question quotient should increase exponentially throughout the day. So for right now, I'm going to thank Jonathan for his time. Say bye, Dad.
Bye, Dad.
All right, thank you.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.